The sea was merciless that night. Waves crashed against the cliffs as if trying to swallow the world whole, and above the roar of the storm, a single question cut through the darkness. Do you want the truth? Rosen stood at the edge of it all, wind tearing through her golden hair. Will you trust me no matter what I say? She asked softly. In front of her, he watched in silence, tall, unshaken, dressed in authority and restraint. Then he answered, It doesn't matter, and Rosen knew better than anyone how dangerous trust could be. The deeper it grew, the sharper it stabbed when broken. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. So just tell me, Rosen, if it truly didn't matter to him. Then she would tell him the truth. Are you a good liar? The man sitting across from Rosen asked calmly. Rosen leaned back in the interrogation chair, chains clinking softly at her wrists. Outside the narrow window, dark clouds loomed heavily as the Vaiheth cut through the restless sea, bound for the Isle of Monte. Not at all, she replied nonchalantly. I've never told a lie. Not once. The man's pen scratched steadily against the paper. But your file says otherwise, he said, lifting his gaze. And I've never told a lie is the exact sentence you repeatedly stated in court. Rosen leaned forward irritably, metal scraping against metal. That damn judge wouldn't listen to me. He didn't react, he simply wrote it down. What is your name? She smirked. Why are you asking that? Unless you've been living under a rock, everyone knows my name. It's protocol, he said sharply. Just state your name. Rosen Walker. He didn't look convinced. That's not what we have in the file. But that is my real name, she replied, shrugging. He leaned back slightly. I don't care about that. I'm asking you to confirm the name written here. Her brow furrowed faintly. For a second, the confidence slipped. Rosenhauers, she muttered. He nodded once and continued reading. You were sentenced to 50 years at the age of 17. Imprisoned in Perrine Female Penitentiary. 1 year later, you escaped. According to this, you crawled down a cliff and climbed Dobe Mountain with your bare hands. Rosen listened patiently. You were arrested again 3 months later in St. Vin, after hiding. An additional 25 years were added to your sentence. You were transferred to Alcapez, a maximum security prison. His eyes lifted briefly to meet hers. 5 years later, you escaped again. You evaded the Imperial Army for an entire year. It also states you escaped using nothing but a spoon. He paused. Is all of this true? Rosen smiled wider. Of course it's true, and you wouldn't believe what I had to go through to get that spoon. The amount of time I had to tolerate that disgusting prison guard. He raised his hand with a quiet sigh. I don't need the details, just answer the question. She nodded lightly. Yes, it's all true. Then she lifted her gaze fully to meet his. Her smile faded. The man sitting in front of her was the famous war hero, Ian Connor. There wasn't a single person who hadn't seen his face during the war. Every time aircraft flew overhead, flyers bearing his image would rain down from the sky. When his voice echoed through battlefield broadcasts, everyone would look up, mesmerized. The government knew exactly how to fool people. A handsome young pilot was the perfect medium for propaganda, and in the middle of the chaos of war, they too had needed Ian Connor. And what was your crime? Ian asked suddenly. Rosen blinked, pulled out of her daze. What? I'm asking, he clarified evenly. What was your crime? What got you imprisoned in the first place? I didn't do it. Ian's gaze hardened slightly. As per protocol, just answer what I asked. Insisting you're innocent doesn't change the guilty verdict. Rosen glared at him. Nor does it change the truth that I am innocent. Before they could argue further, the door burst open. Commander, what are you doing? A young man hurried inside, breathing unevenly. Then he sighed. I know you're a stickler for rules, but there's no need for this. Prisoners being sent to the Isle of Monte are the worst of the worst, and... He paused, turning to point directly at Rosen. It's the Witch of Alcapez. You must not let your guard down. She escaped twice. I saw her file. She was just 17 when she murdered her husband, Hindley Howers. Both men looked at Rosen. She nodded slowly. Stabbed him 36 times, she said calmly. They called it a crime of passion, said it came from deep resentment. Her voice wavered. But it wasn't me. I loved my husband. I was a good wife. It must have been some burglar. There were so many people jealous of Hindley. They didn't even carry out a proper investigation. They didn't listen to a word I said. They just threw me into prison. She began sobbing softly. Ian looked at her without emotion. Enough with the act. It doesn't matter what kind of wife you were. You were found guilty. That's final. The sobbing stopped instantly. Rosen sighed inwardly. That didn't work. Maybe because she looked a mess right now. Ian stood up. Nobody believed you were capable of escaping. Yet you did. So what's the difference? Just because you're small doesn't mean you couldn't have done it. All evidence points to you. It's clear you're lying. He stepped forward. Henry, bring her. Henry grabbed her arm and followed Ian out of the room. To Rosen, they were gentle compared to the guards she had faced before. But regardless of who was guard and who was prisoner, it was always a cat-and-mouse relationship. The moment one let their guard down, the other would strike. And Rosen was an expert at seizing opportunities. Her eyes drifted to Ian, more precisely, to his waist. A key hung there, the key to her escape, and she was confident that this time, too, she would triumph. Has the ball ended? Ian asked as they walked down the corridor. Henry let out a long sigh. Of course. We couldn't possibly let the guests see the witch. Not everyone is as fearless as you, Commander. Many things had changed after the war. The Vyheth, once a military supply ship filled with smoke, gunfire, and wounded soldiers, had been transformed into a passenger steamer. Where there had once been blood and chaos, there were now chandeliers, music, and elegant dances. And its destination, newly redecorated and advertised, was the Isle of Monte. It was almost comical. The prisoner being sent to that infamous island was sharing the same ship with the wealthy elite, who treated the gruesome place like a tourist attraction. Ian led them outside. The wind blew gently, the sea shimmering under the moonlight. The night was beautiful, especially for someone being sent to the Isle of Monte for life. You dug the tunnel out of Alcapez and crawled through it with your bare hands, correct? Ian asked. Rosen turned to him. Yes. But why are you asking that again? She said, confused. He studied her profile. People say you used magic. Is that true? Rosen understood immediately where that rumor had come from. The last person who had escaped Alcapez before her was a witch, and that was 36 years ago. So when the media learned about Rosen's escape, they reached the simplest conclusion. She must be a witch too. After all, people are always afraid of what they cannot understand. Even in an era where magic was suppressed and science was revered, traces of the old world still lingered. Witches had diminished in number. They had hidden themselves, carefully, where they could not be seen. But that did not mean they had completely disappeared. Do you really think I would have ended up like this if I were a witch? Rosen snapped. Getting caught again after escaping? Letting you put handcuffs on me? Henry scoffed loudly. Don't let her fool you, Commander. We just saw her act. She can deceive anyone. Rosen's sharp gaze turned to him, her voice dropped to a whisper. Consider yourself lucky. If I were a witch, I would have sewn your mouth shut first. Henry stiffened. She turned back to Ian. In fact, I passed the magic stone test. What more proof do you need? Or do you have so little faith in your own army? Henry's temper flared instantly, but Ian's voice cut through the tension. Henry, hands off. His tone was firm. Or I will report you to higher command. Now bring what I asked for. Henry hesitated, then walked off reluctantly. Ian faced her again. Rosen Howers, he began evenly, you are the most notorious prison escapee in the Empire. I don't care whether you're lying or whether you're a witch. I'm simply informing you of a few facts. She watched him carefully. First, you are convicted. That verdict is final. You are sentenced to life on the Isle of Monte. Second, I was ordered to personally transfer you there. He paused. Third, there have been prisoners who escaped from Alcapez in the past, but no one has ever escaped from the Isle of Monte. It's impossible. His gaze sharpened. Even for a witch. Rosen froze. It was meant to crush her, spirit. But her eyes drifted again, briefly, to the keys at his waist. Those keys were for her handcuffs, or perhaps for the lifeboats. Either way, if she was going to escape, it had to be before they reached the Isle. Henry returned, carrying what Ian had requested. Meat. Rosen's eyes flickered with confusion. What was he planning? Ian took the meat and stepped toward the railing. Watch carefully, he said calmly. See what the ocean can do. He threw the meat into the dark water. In an instant, the surface erupted. Whales surged violently, tearing into it with terrifying force. Henry smiled coldly. See, witch? Watch what those creatures can do. Rosen's face paled. She had to think. Quickly. Anything. Ian removed his keys deliberately and stepped closer to her. Taking a lifeboat might seem like a good option, he said quietly. I noticed you eyeing these, but I hope you've come to your senses now, Rosen Howers. In that moment, Rosen realized something. Ian Connor was no gentleman. Whatever image the flyers had painted, whatever heroic voice had echoed through the skies, that man did not stand before her. To the people, he was a hero. To her, he was no different from all the guards she had encountered before, and she should have known better. With that, Rosen was escorted back to the lower prison quarters of the ship. Hey, Maria's voice rang out the moment she stepped inside the cell. Are you really not going to tell me? You met Ian Connor, right? Rosen shot her a straight look. What are you getting at, Maria? Maria raised an eyebrow, a teasing grin spreading across her face. What do you think I'm talking about? A young and pretty prisoner? And a handsome commander? Oh, come on, Maria, Rosen sighed. Ian Connor, of all people, won't be desperate enough to touch a woman. And a prisoner at that. Maria chuckled. But that worked for you in Alcapez, so why not try flirting with him? Rosen's expression turned serious. She lowered her voice. It's not that simple. The sea is filled with monsters. Maria grabbed her shoulder firmly. Hey, you're not giving up, are you? She asked, her tone suddenly sharp. Rosen met her gaze. She had first met Maria in Alcapez. And if anyone deserved to be called the Witch of Alcapez, it wasn't Rosen, it was Maria. The guards ruled the prison from the outside. Inside, Maria was queen. Anyone who dared upset her soon turned into a corpse. When Rosen had first been transferred there, she was already infamous because of her first escape. Perhaps that was why Maria had taken a liking to her. Because of that, Rosen's days in Alcapez had been far easier than they should have been. She hadn't understood at first why the other inmates treated her with such strange respect. Now she did. They all wanted her to win. They all placed their faith in her. They idolized her, believing she could humiliate the Imperial Army and escape once again. You know me, Maria, Rosen finally replied. I never give up. Maria grinned. That's my girl. She offered her a cigarette. As Rosen held it between her fingers, her thoughts drifted. Ian Connor. He used to be a pilot, she murmured. Why did he leave the Air Force and come here? Maria shrugged lazily. No idea. We just need to work on seducing him so we can get out of here. Rosen shook her head slightly. That only worked on foolish men. Ian Connor was not one of them. And besides, she was completely out of ideas. Even if she managed to steal the key and reach a lifeboat, would she survive those creatures in the sea? Obviously not. And even if by some miracle she did, she would die of thirst and hunger before reaching land. As her mind spiraled with thoughts, she heard a soft sound outside the prison room. She looked out. A little girl was playing with a ball. Rosen frowned. What was a child doing near this area? Concerned, she called out gently. Hey, you shouldn't be here. Go back to your parents. The little girl turned, and instead of leaving, she walked closer. Hello, she said brightly. My name is Lila Reville. Reville? Rosen's eyes widened slightly. Do you happen to know Henry Reville? The girl nodded happily. Yes, he's my uncle. Rosen scoffed under her breath. That foolish man let this child wander here? You shouldn't be here, Rosen repeated softly. This isn't a place for children. The girl's eyes immediately filled with tears. But I already told all my friends that I'd get to meet Rosen Walker, the famous escapee in the land. All the grown-ups said she was on this boat. Rosen Walker, Rosen murmured in surprise. The girl smiled again, her tears gone just as quickly. Yes, my grandpa is the captain of this ship, so I told everyone I'd meet Rosen. But nobody believed me. For a moment, Rosen simply stared at her. Then she smiled faintly. Well then, she said softly, it's your lucky day, Lila. Because I am Rosen Walker. Above deck, the night felt lighter. Henry was still complaining, while Ian leaned casually against the railing, laughing softly. You're overthinking this, Ian said. Take it as a vacation. Enjoy the scenery for once. Henry exhaled sharply. About that woman, Ian glanced at him. She's also from Ryerton, Henry continued. It says she was living outside the city when she committed the crime. Ian's expression shifted slightly. You don't need to worry about me. I'm fine, Henry said quickly. I'm just saying, she's from Ryerton too. That's why I mentioned it. I thought maybe that's the reason you're paying her extra attention, Henry explained. Ian didn't answer immediately. Ryerton, their home, the city where they had grown up, where they had attended the military academy, where they had flown their first planes. Ryerton, the city that had later been reduced to rubble under relentless air raids during the war. I know, Ian finally said quietly. Of course you know. I gave you the file, Henry muttered. Still, it's annoying how lucky she is. She escaped when the city was being bombed, and now she's being escorted to the Isle of Monte by Sir Ian Connor himself. Ian looked at him calmly. Yes, he said. But don't forget, it's the Isle of Monte. Henry nodded. I know, but still, at least she's alive. Whether it's the Isle of Monte or anywhere else. Memories crept in, uninvited and sharp, him running, calling their names, crying as smoke swallowed the streets. And when the chaos settled, all he found was a single locket stained with blood. Inside it, a broken image of a mother and child. Below deck, Lila beamed the moment Rosen confirmed who she was. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. But, can you really use magic? Lila asked eagerly. Rosen paused. Then she smiled gently. Lila, will you answer a few questions for me first? Then I'll show you some magic. The little girl fidgeted, but Grandpa said never to do favors for prisoners. It's nothing serious, Rosen assured her softly. I'm just curious about something. Lila hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Do you know a man named Ian Connor? Rosen asked. Lila's face lit up. Yes, he's my uncle's friend, and the best pilot in the world. Are you close to him? Rosen asked. Lila tilted her head. Not really. He's a little scary. But Uncle says he loves me very much, he just doesn't show it. And he's my uncle too, I think. I'm not really sure. Rosen absorbed that quietly. Is he married? She asked casually. Or does he have a girlfriend? No, Lila replied confidently. He's not married. All the other uncles keep telling him to get married, but I don't think he wants to. Have you ever seen him with any ladies? No. Why? Lila asked curiously. Rosen hesitated. What she wanted to ask next was harder to phrase. Lila, have you ever seen Ian being compassionate? What does that mean? Lila blinked. From behind the bars, Maria chimed in lazily. Compassion means feeling sorry for someone, like letting a drenched puppy into your house, that kind of thing. Oh, Lila brightened. You mean love? Rosen gave a small, careful smile. Yes, exactly that. Lila thought for a moment, her brows furrowing in concentration. I don't think he's full of love like that, she answered honestly. But he's a good person. He's a hero, you know. Rosen laughed softly at the child's innocence. Yes, thank you, Lila. Then she leaned closer to the bars. Now, let me show you some magic. Do you have something you can give me? Oh, I have a coin, Lila said excitedly, handing it to her. But what are you going to do with it? I don't know, Rosen said lightly. When it comes to magic, you always need a medium. With a swift flick of her fingers, the coin disappeared from her palm. Lila gasped. It disappeared! Rosen smiled and smoothly slipped the coin out from behind her fingers, holding it up again. It didn't disappear, she said gently. Here. Take it. Back. It's your lucky coin. Lila clutched it tightly. And here's the secret, Rosen whispered. At sundown the coin will turn into gold. But you must not tell anyone, okay? That will break the spell. Lila nodded enthusiastically, eyes shining with excitement. Then she ran off happily. Maria's voice drifted from behind. Was that really magic? Nope, Rosen replied, waving her hand dismissively. Just a simple trick, she'll realize it soon enough. Maria gave her a look. I thought you don't lie. You always say that. Do I? Rosen asked calmly. Yes. You said if you were a witch, you wouldn't be here. Rosen lay down on the floor. But where could I possibly go? She murmured. Even if I jumped from here in the middle of the ocean? Maria paused, lowering her voice. Hey, she said quietly. Even if you can't make it all the way to land with a lifeboat, there's somewhere else you could go. They say there's a place where witches hide. No one knows if it truly exists. She was talking about the Witches' Island, Valpurgis. You've heard of it, right? Maria asked. They say it isn't far from the Isle of Monte. Rosen knew the rumors. They called it the Witches' Island for a reason. Not everyone could go there. Maria said it half-jokingly anyway, then smirked. Still, forget about fairy tales. Focus on deceiving that Commander Ian Connor. Rosen looked down thoughtfully. It wasn't easy. Using a war hero's pity sounded tempting, but the old tactics she once relied on would not work on Ian Connor. He was someone who had always been on the winning side of history, a hero, a man accustomed to triumph. So she would have to offer him another kind of triumph, not love. Tempting him with that would be easier than love. Above deck, Ian stood with Henry. He remembered the advice he had once received about Henry. If he needs to vent, let him speak, don't interrupt. So Ian remained silent. Henry's frustration shifted again as they walked. They want to make you suffer, Henry, muttered bitterly. They want to put blame on you for failing to protect Riordan. That's why they sent you here. They want you to drag down Riordan's witch with your own hands. Ian didn't respond. Everyone resents her, Henry continued. She's the only one who survived. If you personally escort her to the Isle of Monte, they'll praise you all over again. He sighed. Once this is over, you should live your life. You've got nothing but a glorious future ahead. Ian's gaze drifted to the dark horizon. A glorious future? When the war ended, he had marched beneath the Arch of Triumph. Crowds had chanted his name. Flowers had rained down around him. Had it made him happy? Had he ever felt proud? He couldn't remember. You can't protect everyone, Henry said firmly. There's no such thing as a perfect victory. You're not a god. And forget about Rosen Walker. I'll handle her. No, Ian replied quietly. I'll take care of it myself. You focus on getting better. They parted. Ian returned to his quarters and sat down. Henry's words lingered. It wasn't your fault. Those airborne missions had barely made sense. If it hadn't been for Ian, they might have failed entirely. But then, who was responsible? If he wasn't at fault for the deaths, then who was? The order echoed in his mind. Transfer the prisoners to the Isle of Monte. Pay special attention to Rosen Howers. Rosen Howers, prison escapee, born and raised in Riordan, the sole survivor of the bombing. She was alive. And he... Before his thoughts could go further, a voice broke through. Hey! He looked up. What do you want? Rosen demanded sharply. Why did you call me here? Are you even listening? Ian blinked out of his thoughts and closed the file in front of him. Right, he said evenly. Let's continue. He began repeating the regulations again. Why she was not allowed to leave the ship, why escape was impossible, why the lifeboats were guarded. Rosen's temper snapped. She swept the papers off his desk in one sharp motion. They're enough, she snapped. I get it. You don't have to repeat it. I'd be a complete idiot to even think about escaping. Do you think I'm stupid? Ian let out a slow breath. There isn't much difference between a hero and an idiot, he replied calmly. Neither lacks courage. Even you are considered an anti-hero by some. His gaze sharpened. But to me, you became an idiot the moment you chose to run. Rosen scoffed. So what? You think I should have quietly served 50 years? She leaned forward. Tell me then, hero, what should I have done? She had learned something about this man. He reacted more when she provoked him, when she spoke boldly, than when she cried and acted weak. You should have admitted to your crime, Ian answered. You would have received a reduced sentence. You might have been transferred to a lower security prison. Rosen laughed bitterly. Then I would have been in Riordan when it happened, she shot back. And I'd be dead. Her voice hardened. And I still don't understand. I didn't kill him. And even if I did, why 50 years? That's the maximum sentence for murder. Ian pointed at the document. It's written in the legislation, but... He stood up. Being sentenced to life and sent to the Isle of Monte. That was your own doing. With that, he turned toward the door. Rosen's heart skipped. If he left now, she would be back to square one. Worse, she might not get another chance. Anything would do. Even nonsense. Then what's the difference between you and me? She called out quickly. Ian paused. You said heroes and idiots are the same, she continued. Then you're an idiot too. Nobody believed we'd win the war, she went on. We're an empire in name, but we're small and weak. We fought a country that brought nations to their knees, and we won. Her voice sharpened, but only in name. What did we gain from it? Ian's fist tightened at his side. The people are broken. The land is ruined, Rosen continued, stepping closer. And you, the so-called hero, are standing here in uniform, transferring a prisoner to a place like that. She poked his chest. In the next second, Ian grabbed the chain of her handcuffs sharply. Shut your mouth, he ordered. Rosen got him, so she pressed further. So you call this a victory? She challenged. Don't talk about things you don't understand, Ian warned. But she didn't stop. She waited for his patience to snap. She braced herself. She was used to pain. She expected the blow. Instead, a loud bang echoed through the room. Ian's fist had struck the door, not her. Rosen Howers, he said through clenched teeth. You're right. She froze. But you don't have the right to say that. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with restrained fury. So many of my comrades were injured. So many died. History will not remember them. It never does. His breathing was heavy now. They lost their youth, their lives, for the public. We never expected people like you to be grateful, people who only know how to run. But at the very least, his voice lowered. Don't insult them. Rosen stepped out of Ian's cabin, her grip tightening around the cold chain at her wrists. What had she expected from that man? There were times during the war when his voice had echoed through the sky, carried by broadcasts. She had listened to it for hours back then. And now that she had heard it in person, perhaps she had been foolish enough to think that if she kept talking to him, one day he might answer her in that same calm, warm tone. What an idiot she was. You braided your hair, washed your face. Now what? Henry said sarcastically as he walked beside her. Need some makeup too? Why not? Rosen replied dramatically. Don't be ridiculous, Henry muttered, grabbing the chain of her handcuffs more firmly. Don't try those tricks. He won't fall for it. Rosen sighed. He was right, and she almost wished Ian Connor were half as easy to manipulate as this man. She smiled suddenly. Or perhaps you're the one who's attracted to me? Henry nearly choked. What are you even saying? Let's just walk in silence. As they turned the corner, Rosen's eyes caught sight of Lila again. The little girl was wandering alone. A flicker of concern crossed her face. Would she really be all right, roaming around like this? Her gaze shifted back to Henry. He was fumbling absently with the keys at his waist. They really did look alike. Rosen leaned down slightly. Your niece is adorable. Lila, right? Henry stiffened. What? How do you know her name? As he turned back hurriedly, the keys slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Rosen smiled sweetly. Don't worry, what could I possibly do in cuffs? Henry sighed as he picked them up. You really are a witch. But stay away from Lila. He turned again. That was when Rosen saw it. Lila was clutching her throat. Her small body trembled. Her face had turned pale. She was struggling to breathe. Henry! Rosen's voice sharpened. We need to call a doctor! Henry turned and froze. Hey, snap out of it! We need a doctor! Rosen shouted. But he stood there, stunned. What was wrong with him? Useless. Rosen began shouting for help, but the corridor was empty. She turned back to Henry urgently. I can help her. Uncuff me. Memories flashed in her mind. Why do we even need to learn this, Emily? She had once complained. Of course we need to, Emily had replied patiently. People die all the time during war. Human life is fragile. But you don't need this knowledge to cure people, Rosen had argued. And why should we even save them? It's not like anyone's grateful. Emily had smiled softly at her. Rosen, no one can save the world alone. Not everyone can wield magic. But there comes a time when we all require its power. The words rang clearly in her mind now. Rosen rushed toward Lila. Moments later, people began gathering, drawn by the commotion. Murmurs spread through the corridor. That young lady saved the child. Rosen sat frozen. On the floor, Lila cradled in her arms. The girl's breathing slowly steadied. After a while, Rosen whispered softly, relief flooding her voice. I saved her life, Emily. Finally, Henry snapped out of his shock and rushed forward. Lila, are you okay? He asked urgently, kneeling beside her. One of the guest ladies stepped forward. I didn't see everything, but that young woman was holding the child and performing first aid. It looked like she was choking. Rosen remained seated on the floor. Her eyes drifted to the small candy lying nearby. The one Lila had been choking on. Such a tiny thing, so harmless looking. Yet it had almost taken a life. Maybe this candy was just as lethal as a bullet. You didn't have to be a soldier to save someone. And you didn't have to be a soldier to kill someone either. You were right, Emily, Rosen thought quietly. A faint smile touched her lips. Hey, she said lightly to Henry, did you see that? If you want to thank me, she continued, lifting her chin slightly, I'd appreciate some water to wash myself. And maybe some decent food sent to my cell while you're at it. Before Henry could respond, another voice spoke. I will see to that. Rosen looked up. Ian Connor stood there. Before she could say anything, a trembling voice echoed down the corridor. Oh, my child! Are you all right? Grandpa! Lila cried, rushing into the old man's arms. Rosen watched silently. So, this was the captain of the ship. Lila's grandfather. She glanced back at Ian. I was just joking. I don't need a reward. It's not difficult, Ian replied calmly. Soldiers always pay their debts. You may be a prisoner, but you are no exception. He reached for her wrists and fastened the handcuffs back on. But this remains. Hey, Rosen protested. Then how am I supposed to wash myself? I'll have someone assist you, Ian replied evenly. Ian Connor, the old man's voice thundered behind them. Who taught you your manners? It certainly wasn't me. How dare you put a lady who saved Lila in chains? But that's the rule, Captain Reville, Ian answered firmly. Let her enjoy her freedom. For the moment, the captain insisted. Where would she even go in the middle of the ocean? I cannot ignore the law, Ian argued. That law applies on land, the old man retorted sharply. On the Viheth, I am the law. Rosen almost enjoyed the exchange. But when her eyes fell on Lila again, alive, breathing, smiling faintly, she felt nothing but relief. Captain, she is a prisoner, Ian insisted. The old man gently patted Lila's head. To me, she is the hero who saved my granddaughter. He then turned toward Rosen. Lady Howers, please forgive this foolish young man and his rudeness. Accept my sincere gratitude. Then he paused, realizing something. Oh, where are my manners? Let me introduce myself properly. He straightened slightly. I am former Navy Admiral Alex Reville. Rosen's eyes widened in surprise. Who hadn't heard of Alex Reville? His statue, depicting him standing firm against the enemy, was a famous tourist attraction. She cleared her throat. Captain, I am no lady. And not Howers either. My name is Rosen Walker. You probably already know. Yes, Miss Walker, he said warmly. But if it weren't for you, I might have lost my only grandchild. He studied her thoughtfully. I heard your request, he continued. But treating you like a hero inside that cell would be a disgrace. So, Miss Walker, he said kindly, if you have nothing scheduled tomorrow evening, would you do me the honor of joining us for dinner? Rosen couldn't even imagine herself sitting at such an elegant dinner table. Crystal glasses, fine cutlery, silk gowns. It felt absurd. She opened her mouth to decline, but Captain Reville raised a gentle hand. You don't need to worry so much, he said warmly. It's just family. Before she could respond, Ian stepped forward. Captain Reville, I don't think that would be appropriate. He paused. His eyes met Rosen's. What was he about to say? A murderer? A witch? Someone lowly who doesn't belong among us? Filthy? Dangerous? Suddenly, an old memory surfaced in Rosen's mind. It is always my hope that my aviation corps will better protect all of you. That gentle voice. She had listened to it countless times during the war, cheeks flushing as it echoed through the broadcasts. Now, because she's a murderer, Ian finished coldly. The voice did not match the one in her memory. Not at all, Rosen scoffed lightly. Thank you, Captain Reville, she said smoothly. I'm deeply honored. How could I possibly refuse a good meal? She accepted the invitation, cutting Ian's protest short. Ian stared at her in disbelief. Rosen avoided his gaze, but her thoughts drifted back again. Those flyers again, Rosen? Emily had once teased when she saw her collecting them. I just saw them on the ground, Rosen had said casually, gathering the papers with Ian Connor's face printed across them. Emily had sighed. You're head over heels. Just be careful Hindley doesn't see them. Rosen had only half listened. Her entire attention had been on the man in the picture, Ian Connor. It was difficult for her to admit now that she had once admired him so deeply, and each time he reminded her, through his cold words and rigid stance, that he was nothing like the man of her dreams, her anger rose uncontrollably. He should have remained nothing more than a distant fantasy. But no. Her life had always had a strange habit of dragging her exactly where she never wanted to go. The next day, an attendant arranged by Captain Reville led Rosen to a private bath. Steam filled the room. Rosen lowered herself into the hot water, and for a brief moment, it felt like heaven. She had accepted the captain's invitation only to irritate Ian Connor. But this was unexpectedly good. She couldn't even remember the last time she had bathed like this. Yet she knew better than to grow attached. Warmth had always been a luxury in her life. She had been an idiot once, clinging to small comforts as if they would last forever. Not anymore. Outside, raised voices broke the quiet. Henry had arrived. You can't go in, the attendant insisted. It's Commander Connor's order, Henry replied firmly. Hearing the commotion, Rosen stepped out, wrapping a towel around herself. What is it? She called. Do you have something to say to me? Henry immediately covered his eyes. You are aware that I'm a man, right? He muttered awkwardly. He turned to the attendants. Wait outside. I have something confidential to discuss with her. It won't take long. They hesitated, but at the mention of Ian Connor's name, they obeyed and stepped out. Rosen narrowed her eyes. So what is it? Rushing in here and forcing everyone out? Henry sighed. Just stay there. I'll leave once I'm done. Rosen slipped back into the tub behind the screen. You're a terrible liar, she said coolly. Ian Connor would never order you to come into my bath. At most, he'd tell you to guard the door. So whatever it is, say it without using your boss as an excuse. Henry hesitated. Then he said quietly, It's about Lila. Rosen's expression softened slightly. Oh? How is she? She's fine. The doctor saw her last night. Rosen nodded, but it was Henry who didn't seem fine. Are you really a pilot? She asked casually. You didn't look very brave last night. Henry fell silent for a moment. Then he spoke. I had a sister and a brother-in-law, Lila's parents. Rosen didn't interrupt. You know Ryerton was bombed during the war, right? He continued. Were you there that day? Rosen sighed softly. No, she hadn't been there. That was the day she escaped prison for the first time. It was only later, in Alcapez, that she learned what had happened to Ryerton. My sister was there, Henry said quietly. Lila was just a baby. Rosen listened in silence. When she had first heard about the bombing, she hadn't believed it. How could a city as large as Ryerton simply disappear overnight? You know, I could have stopped it, Henry murmured slowly. But I didn't. It wasn't something that concerned Rosen directly. But still, why didn't you stop it? She asked quietly. Henry exhaled. That day, we ran into enemy aircraft in our airspace. It was chaos. Their fleet split into two groups, one heading toward Malona and the other toward Ryerton. He swallowed. Malona was the capital city, and Ryerton was our hometown. Rosen listened in silence. It was Commander Ian Connor who had to decide, Henry continued. He said, "We will defend Malona." He let out a long breath. It was the right choice. I don't blame him. There was nothing more we could have done. He looked down at his hands. During the war, I kept going, but when it ended, my head broke. I couldn't fly anymore. That's when I realized I wasn't the man I used to be. He paused. But I still have Lila. The room fell quiet. So is that why you hate me? Rosen asked slowly. Because I'm the criminal who survived, while your innocent sister died? Henry didn't hesitate. Yes. Rosen nodded faintly. I see. That's understandable. Then go on hating me. Just as people needed a hero to worship, they also needed a witch to blame. Two sides of the same coin. Henry took a breath. But I came here to apologize, he said at last. Without you, Lila wouldn't be here. His voice softened. Thank you for saving her life, Rosen Walker. Outside, the attendants shifted nervously. They wanted to step in, but how could they, if it was supposedly Commander Connor's order? Then their eyes widened. Ian Connor himself had just arrived. Inside, Rosen peeked from behind the screen. Thank you, she said lightly. Then how about showing me how grateful you are? Her gaze drifted toward the keys hanging at Henry's waist. Never, Henry said firmly. Don't even think about it. Rosen smiled. Why do you treat me like that? Because I'm a prisoner? Do you really believe I killed him? Henry stiffened. What if I didn't? She continued softly. And even if we pretend I did, what if he deserved to die? Henry clutched his head. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. Don't trick me. Rosen laughed quietly. Fine, forget the keys. How about another favor? She stepped closer, lowering her voice, whispering something near his ear. Henry's eyebrows rose. What are you up to now? Nothing, she replied sweetly. Just asking for a small favor. The door suddenly swung open. Ian Connor stood at the entrance. What on earth is going on here? He demanded furiously. Henry's face paled the moment he saw Ian at the door. It's not what it looks like, he blurted out. Ian's eyes shifted to Rosen, then back to Henry. Are you really going to try to convince me of that right now? He asked coldly. Henry hesitated. Well, you see, I needed to talk to Rosen Walker. Ian's jaw tightened. Get out. Now. Henry didn't argue further. He stepped out, knowing very well he was already in trouble. The door shut. Ian turned slowly toward Rosen. Without a word, he grabbed a large towel from the side. Rosen Walker, he said stiffly, pointing toward the sofa. Please sit there. She hesitated but obeyed. In the next second, he wrapped the towel securely around her, covering her properly. She looked up at him. He seemed angry, but there was something else there too. Silence lingered. He looked awkward, almost uneasy. Finally, he spoke. Did Henry do something against your will? He asked carefully. I mean, did he force you in any way? Rosen blinked. No. Ian's gaze didn't soften. You can tell me. If you want, I can arrange a different guard for you. She studied him. Why was he doing this? Henry was his subordinate. She was just a convicted prisoner, a so-called witch. Do you not even trust your own men? She asked lightly. The ones who fought beside you in war? Ian answered immediately. People are complex. He's a good soldier. That doesn't make him perfect. He looked directly at her. So answer me. Nothing happened? Rosen held his gaze, then decided to take pity on him. It's nothing like that, she said casually. We were just talking. Apparently, he was too shy to thank me in front of everyone. She smirked faintly. But trust me, I wouldn't waste my time with a big baby like him. Boring. And it's clear he couldn't give me what I wanted anyway, so what's the use? Ian's eyes narrowed slightly. How did you manage to deceive everyone? He asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. It's obvious, he continued. You're always looking for a chance to lie. Even now, I can read you like a book. Rosen smiled slowly. Would you like to know how I managed to deceive everyone? Ian didn't respond. Instead of standing over her, he quietly sat down in front of her. Because I didn't deceive anyone, Rosen said calmly. They just pretend to be deceived. Ian frowned slightly. What do you mean? It doesn't matter whether I'm a good liar or not, she said. People only hear what they want to hear. No one truly cares about the truth. They just need a scapegoat, someone they can point at without feeling guilty. So I say whatever I want, knowing nothing will change regardless of what I say. She tilted her head, smiling. But I suppose you really are a hero. So noble of you to even take time to worry about a lowly prisoner like me. Ian ran a hand through his hair, pushing it back. Then he looked at her quietly. Then tell me, he asked, do you also consider me a hero? Rosen laughed softly. Does it surprise you that even a criminal like me would look up to a hero? Ian rubbed the back of his neck. No, I didn't mean... I had a crush on you. Like everyone else, she said casually. The sudden confession froze him in place. Seeing his expression, she added lightly, I'm a citizen too, you know. Are you offended? I used to collect those flyers with your face whenever they rained from the sky. He looked genuinely surprised. You collected them? She nodded. It's nothing strange. You know that, right? Know what? That you're a good-looking man, she replied with a grin. The words slipped out too easily. Realizing what she had just said, her face flushed. She quickly turned away. So don't bother Henry, she muttered. And please send the cabin maids back. I need to get dressed. I won't do anything. You can post guards outside if you're worried. Ian slowly stood up. He stepped forward and offered her his hand. Rosen blinked in surprise. I'm not offended, he said quietly. I was just... taken aback. He looked at her steadily. And I think you were right. We're not that different. Her heart skipped. So let's go, he added. Go where? She asked slowly, reaching out hesitantly. To get you dressed, he replied. It's time for the dinner you were so excited about. Before she could think further, she placed her hand in his. In one swift motion, Ian pulled her up, and the next second, he lifted her onto his shoulder like luggage. Wait, what are you doing? She shouted, startled and furious. Just send the maids back. There's no telling what you might do, Ian replied firmly as he walked. I can't trust you. He stopped briefly and added in a lower tone. It was a mistake to obey the captain's order, and now I can't even trust Henry. He set her down inside the dressing room and refastened the handcuffs securely. So I'll handle it myself. He looked directly at her. Saving the child, now everyone has a soft spot for you except me. His voice remained calm. I will not underestimate you. Rosen scoffed. What? Are you afraid of me? Afraid I might escape? Ian held her gaze. Yes, I am afraid of you, he answered plainly. The honesty stunned her. He had the authority, the strength, the control. Why would he be afraid? Ian stepped back and called for the maids to enter. I'll be outside, he said shortly. He stood by the door himself, guarding it. Inside, Rosen stared at his silhouette through the gap. She still didn't understand. Why was he afraid of her? A moment earlier, Ian's eyes had fallen on the belongings brought into his study from his luggage. His brows furrowed. Among the neatly stacked items lay a file, one he had specifically ordered to be burned. Yet it was still there. Assuming it was a simple miscommunication, he picked it up and opened it. Inside were carefully collected newspaper articles, and throughout the collection, one name had been circled again and again in red ink. Rosen Walker. Ian stared at it in silence, a cigar burning slowly between his lips. At first, it had only been something to pass the time. A habit. A distraction to survive the endless days that came after the war. After the war, every night he dreamed the same dream. His aircraft spiraling down, sinking into dark water, the cold swallowing him whole. It was a nightmare that hunted him relentlessly. He knew he was not in a good place, not in the right state of mind, but no one could ever know that. He could not afford to break. He was the symbol of victory. One night, unable to sleep, he had picked up a newspaper. He read without truly reading, forcing words into his mind without understanding them. Sometimes his eyes stopped at one word, Riorton. The city reduced to ruins because of a choice he had made. But nowhere in those articles was his name blamed. Instead, they spoke of a witch, a villain, a scapegoat, a name manufactured by the press, the government, the military. Rosen Howers. From that day onward, it was as though he had been bewitched. He searched for her name everywhere. To him, she felt like another version of himself. In a way, they both carried misfortune. But if they were both simply cursed by fate, why did the world see them so differently? Why was she labeled a witch, evil and unforgivable, while he was labeled a hero, the savior of the nation? She had taken one life deliberately. He had taken more than 15,000 unwillingly. If the weight of their sins were placed side by side, whose would be heavier? Sometimes, a quiet thought whispered inside him. Run away. Don't get caught. Go far away and live the rest of your life. Witch or not, innocent or guilty. Ian Connor did not truly care, because she was the one person who had survived Riorton, the one person he had been able to save, if only by accident. Who would have imagined that the man praised as the nation's hero was in reality this broken inside, that somewhere inside he was quietly rooting for a convicted criminal to escape? Ian was sitting in his study, trying to arrange his thoughts, when the door suddenly opened. A small figure peeked in. Ian, can I come in? Lila asked sweetly, holding a bundle of toys in her arms. Sure, Ian replied, a little surprised. What are all those? I want to give Rosen a gift at the party, Lila said, stepping inside. But I don't know which one she'd like, so... Can you choose one for me? You know her best. Ian blinked. I do? Lila nodded confidently. Yes, that's yours, right? She pointed toward the file on his desk. One of the cabin maids was going to burn it the other day, but I told her not to. I brought it back for you. Ian's face stiffened. How long have you known about this, Lila? He asked carefully. Lila looked up at him innocently. Well, everyone has been collecting news clippings about Rosen, so I thought I would too. But when I looked at your newspaper, all the parts about her had already been cut out. Ian covered his face for a moment, embarrassed. Then he picked Lila up gently, taking a slow breath to steady himself. Have you told anyone about this? He asked calmly. No, not yet. He nodded. Then will you promise me to keep this our secret? Why? Lila tilted her head. Will you get in trouble if I tell? Ian gave a small nod. You see, she's a prisoner and I'm her guard. Lila thought for a moment, then nodded seriously. Okay, I don't want you to get in trouble. She hesitated before adding, but I thought you hated her. Ian shook his head. No, I don't hate her. This is just my job. I'm not supposed to have feelings about it. He paused. Besides, she saved your life, so I won't be rude to her. Lila's eyes brightened. Then, do you like her? Ian froze for a brief second. I don't like or dislike her, Lila, he answered evenly. Lila considered that, then asked, then can I like her? Ian looked at her. I know she killed someone, Lila continued softly, but she also saved me. So, she's at 0 now, right? So it's okay if I like her? Before Ian could respond, Lila held out her hand. This is for you, she said. A small coin rested in her palm. It's a lucky coin. It will bring you good luck. I think you need it more than me. You always have bad dreams. Ian frowned slightly. Where did you get this, Lila? Lila averted her gaze like a child caught doing something she shouldn't have. Ian sighed. Never accept anything from her, he said gently, even if she's not a witch. You still have to be careful. Still, he kept the coin. Throwing it away didn't feel right. Now go get ready for dinner, he added. Lila nodded, then paused at the door. But Ian, do you know where Uncle Henry is? He's keeping an eye on Rosen Howers, Ian replied. Lila shook her head. But I just checked. He was not outside the door. Ian froze, then headed for the door. As he stood outside, he forced himself to stay calm. After all, he was used to this, hiding his emotions, burying them deep where no one could see. Hey, nothing happened. You have to believe me, Henry pleaded, his voice strained with urgency. Ian didn't budge. Be quiet, he said coldly, and behave properly. I am behaving. We were just talking, Henry argued. Inside the room, Rosen stood still, listening. A flicker of worry crossed her face. Was Henry going to get in trouble because of her? Miss Howers, you look wonderful, the maid said gently, giving her a small push. Why don't you step out? Rosen stepped outside. Dressed in a soft green gown, her hair neatly styled, she looked nothing like a prisoner, more like a noble lady. Only the handcuffs betrayed the truth. Both men froze. For a moment, neither spoke. Rosen's cheeks flushed, part embarrassment, part annoyance. Why are they just staring? Say something. Henry was the first to move. He stepped forward, smiling. Miss Howers, you look great. Allow me to be your escort this evening. Rosen glanced up at him. He was good-looking. She smiled faintly and reached out. All right, I'll trust you this once. But before her hand could fully meet his, Ian stepped in. He pushed her back slightly, his gaze sharp as it landed on Henry. Henry, you are not allowed near Rosen. Henry's expression fell. I thought we already talked about this. It was a misunderstanding. We did, Ian replied. But this isn't about that. I don't trust you with this. Henry frowned. Why not? Because being too friendly can be just as dangerous as being hostile. Henry stared at him. You don't trust me? You think I'd set her free and ignore your orders? Ian said nothing. Henry's face stiffened in disbelief. This isn't about that misunderstanding, Ian continued coldly. There's no telling what kind of scheme the two of you came up with in that room. Rosen, standing beside them, felt both amused and a little guilty. He's not wrong. But she was just asking about tonight's dinner, Henry added quickly. She said there was a dish she wanted to eat. Rosen's face paled. He actually said that out loud. Ian turned toward her. So, what did you want to eat? Before she could answer, Rosen! Lila's cheerful voice broke through. She ran forward with her grandfather. You look so pretty, Lila said brightly. Hello, Lila. You look pretty too, Rosen replied softly. But you look like a princess, Lila added, stepping closer. Ian immediately stepped in front of Rosen. Lila, you can talk to her from there. Rosen watched him. Even to a child, he remained this cold. There you go again, a voice interrupted. Captain Reville stepped forward, shaking his head lightly. Why are you always so suspicious about everything? He turned to Rosen with a polite nod. My apologies, Miss Walker. Dinner will be served shortly. His eyes then dropped to the handcuffs. He paused. Instead of addressing Ian directly, he turned to Henry. Henry, would you kindly assist Miss Walker during dinner? I will do it. Ian's voice cut in firmly. Everyone turned toward him. I'll handle it, he repeated. He looked at Rosen. Any objections? She shook her head lightly. Of course not. Then it's settled, Ian said. Let's go. He grabbed her hand and began leading the way. Rosen glanced at him. Something was different. The look in his eyes today, it wasn't the same as before. Was she imagining it? No, those gray eyes, they felt sharper now, more piercing. Maybe he was right. Maybe they really were the same. Or maybe she was just deluding herself again, clinging to some fantasy to survive this reality. His eyes annoyed her. They weren't warm, they weren't cold, they revealed nothing, and yet she wanted to know what was hidden behind them. Hey, she said suddenly, pulling slightly. When are you going to let go of my hand? Ian paused, then released the chain. I was just trying to guide you. I didn't mean to. I know, she murmured, averting her gaze. She had always known. I will always protect you. Those promises had been lies, and yet she had held on to them. Because she needed something to believe in. She had fallen in love with a version of him that only existed in her mind. And now, when she needed to stay calm, she could barely meet his eyes. Get a grip, she told herself. She could no longer afford to be fooled by those lies. Rosen entered the grand hall beside Ian. The sight before her was breathtaking. The entire room glittered like something out of a dream. A servant pulled out a chair for her. As she took her seat, Rosen realized she hadn't encountered a single noble on her way to the hall. Perhaps they didn't want anyone witnessing a prisoner being treated like this. When the soup was served, her eyes sparkled with delight. She instinctively reached forward. "Walker, stop," Henry interrupted. "Are you going to eat with cuffs? And the captain hasn't begun the meal yet." "But he said the party had begun," Rosen replied. Henry sighed. "That doesn't mean we can start. We have to wait until all the appetizers are served. Don't you know proper etiquette?" Rosen flinched. How would she know? This was her first dinner party. Did they think she was some noble lady from a wealthy family? It was painfully clear she didn't belong here. Forget what he said and just eat. The calm voice beside her silenced the tension. Ian lifted the spoon and held it out to her. Rosen hesitated, then leaned forward and swallowed the soup. Ian glanced toward Henry. "You certainly didn't care about etiquette during the war, Henry." "That was different," Henry replied quickly. "And I didn't mean to embarrass her." As they bickered, Rosen quietly studied Ian. He fed her with steady precision, his expression as stoic as ever. Just look at him. He was taking care of her so delicately, without the slightest change in that cold, stony face. Ignoring the thought, Rosen began trying everything on the table. Each dish was exquisite, more delicious than the last. Whatever she pointed at, Ian obliged without hesitation, but at one point he paused and frowned. "Slow down," he advised. "You're going to choke." Rosen glared at him. "Now my eating annoys you too?" "I never said that," Ian replied with a sigh. "I'm just saying you'll regret it if you end up choking." "Then why do you look so annoyed?" she asked. Ian frowned slightly. "That's just my face." Around the table everyone nodded in agreement. Rosen blinked, momentarily stunned. It was strange. Normally he ignored her. But tonight he was going back and forth with her as if they were equals. After a brief silence, Ian spoke again. "Were you a nurse?" "No." "Then how did you learn emergency first aid like that? Or—" He paused, studying her carefully. "Did you use magic?" Rosen looked surprised at first, then smirked. "It's funny how it's always called witchcraft when a woman does something remarkable," she said coolly. "And to answer your question, I wasn't a nurse, but my husband was a doctor." She paused briefly. "A quack, actually. He didn't even have a proper license. But I picked up a few things from watching him." Of course, Hindley Howers had once had a wife who truly was a witch, but it wasn't her. Emily was the real witch. An awkward silence settled over the table, as though it had finally struck them. She was a murderer, but it had all been over the news for years, so why did he have to ask? "Miss Walker," Captain Reville spoke gently, breaking the tension. "May I ask how old you are? The newspapers were quite insistent about your age. One even claimed you were 70 and used magic to appear younger." Rosen answered calmly. "I am 25 years old, Captain." The captain stared in surprise. "Then that means—" "When you got married?" Rosen nodded. "Yes, I was 15. The captain let out a hesitant laugh. "That was rather young. Was it your parents' decision?" "No, sir. I am an orphan." Silence fell once again. The atmosphere grew heavy, uncomfortable. Henry cleared his throat. "A 15-year-old getting married? How old was your husband then?" Rosen continued chewing her food. "Why does it matter? He's dead." The table fell silent yet again. She hadn't meant to kill the mood, but it was the truth. Ian sighed softly. "Both of you, please stop this and enjoy your meal. Don't forget Lila is here." "It's okay, Ian," Lila said innocently. "I've already read the articles. I know Rosen killed her husband." A pause followed. "But it might not have been her who did it," Lila added, lowering her gaze. "Lila," Ian reminded gently, "she has already been convicted." "But she says she didn't do it," Lila argued. "Why won't anyone listen?" "Because she is lying," Ian replied firmly. "It is true that she saved you, but she also killed her husband." Lila looked down, her voice trembling. "But if nobody believed me—" "It's possible nobody believed Rosen either, and I'd be upset if it were like that." Her eyes filled with tears. Under the table, Rosen kicked Ian lightly, whispering for him to be kinder. Ian frowned. "Why did you give her that coin?" "That coin was already hers," Rosen replied. "I just performed a little trick and gave it back." She knew what he meant. He was reminding her that she had lied to Lila about it bringing luck, and therefore she was a liar. "But Rosen was telling the truth!" Lila exclaimed. "It really did bring me luck." "It's all right, Lila," Rosen said softly. "It's fine. Coincidences added up. And sometimes a lie became the truth. Children were innocent. And it was easy to take advantage of that innocence. And that was all she had done. Soon new dishes were served. Rosen's eyes lit up with delight as she gazed at them. Then her attention paused at one particular plate. "Howers, is there anything you'd like to try?" Ian asked. Rosen grinned. "Yes, I'd like to have Mary a fruit." Ian sliced the fruit carefully and dipped the spoon before offering it to her. She tightened her grip and swallowed it. "Is there anything else we can get for you, Miss Walker?" the captain asked politely. "Howers, the captain is asking you something," Ian said, turning toward her. Then he froze. His eyes widened. Rosen sat there. A thin red drop of blood began to ooze from the corner of her lips. "What's wrong, Walker?" someone exclaimed. Chairs scraped as everyone stood. In the next moment, Rosen collapsed to the floor. She had succeeded. She was sorry Lila had to witness this, but she would not return to her cell without a fight. She needed more time. Her present self knew there were no such things as saviors. Patience and anticipation only led to disappointment. She had to save herself, even if it meant hurting herself in the process. And hopefully, Ian Connor would react exactly as she expected. "Rosen!" Ian's fearful voice echoed through the hall. As darkness closed in, she shut her eyes, wishing that, even for a moment, he would be distracted. Ian caught Rosen in his arms the moment she collapsed. Without a second thought, he rushed her to the ship's medical cabin. After examining her, the doctor stepped outside. "Was it poison?" Ian asked immediately. "No," the doctor replied firmly. "I am certain it wasn't poison. When he had first been called, it was reported as a poisoning attempt. But when he arrived, the situation had been chaotic, everyone panicking, even the soldier escorted back to his cabin. The only one who seemed composed was Sir Ian Connor, and even he seemed slightly off. But that was understandable. It was a serious situation. It was simply her body reacting to that fruit, the doctor explained. That's all. Everyone else who ate it is perfectly fine." Ian's gaze sharpened. "So you're saying she did it on purpose?" The doctor hesitated. "I can't say for sure. If she wasn't aware of the allergy, then it was an accident. But if she was aware," he paused, "then it would be self-harm." Ian's eyes widened. He turned toward Rosen, lying unconscious. "Are you saying she tried to take her life?" "Well, it's not uncommon," the doctor said calmly. "She's a prisoner bound for the Isle of Monte. Many would rather die than be imprisoned there." Ian's jaw tightened. "Is she dying?" "No," the doctor replied. "I've done everything I can. She's simply fainted." "Then why isn't she waking up?" "She's malnourished and weak," the doctor explained. "It may take time for her to regain consciousness." Ian's voice grew quieter, more serious. "If she doesn't wake up, could she die?" The doctor hesitated again. "I cannot say for certain, but it is possible. Prisoners often fall ill in such conditions. Given her current state, it wouldn't be unreasonable to think she could become sick and die as a result." "Ian!" a small voice called from behind. Ian turned. Lila stood there, her eyes filled with worry. "Are you going to send Rosen back?" she asked softly. "I went there. I saw the place. It wasn't good." Her voice trembled. "She'll get sick there. Please don't send her back. Please, just let her rest a little longer before you send her back." Tears welled up in her eyes. Ian looked at her silently for a moment. Then he gently patted her head. Turning to the attendants, he gave a firm order. "Move her to my cabin." Everyone froze in shock. "Sir, she is a prisoner," one of them said hesitantly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Ian replied without hesitation. "She is a prisoner. That's why I must watch her myself." Lately, he had begun to forget his mission. And he didn't understand why. Why was he so concerned about her? She was a convicted murderer. And he was the one dragging her toward a place worse than hell, so why? "I had a crush on you, like everyone else. You were my hero, too." Her words from the other day echoed clearly in his mind. And for some reason, he couldn't ignore them. Rosen was allergic to Maria fruit. Emily had clearly warned her to avoid it. And yet, whenever life became unbearably painful, the thought of that fruit always crossed Rosen's mind. Wouldn't it be a more comfortable death? At least, compared to being beaten to death by Hindley. But this time, death was not what she wanted. If she had truly intended to give up, she would never have gone through all that effort to escape prison. Twice. Her eyes slowly opened. The room around her was unfamiliar. "Where am I?" she murmured, pushing herself up weakly. Her gaze fell to the cuff attached to the bed. A faint smile spread across her lips. At least, she wasn't back in the cell. Then it had been worth it. Still, she wouldn't do it again. Her entire body felt like it was burning, and for a moment she wondered if Lila was all right. "Miss Walker, how are you feeling?" Rosen turned. The captain had entered the room. "Oh, Captain, I didn't see you there," she said softly. "It's all right. Don't strain yourself," he replied gently. "The doctor said you need plenty of rest." Rosen nodded. "I see." The captain sat down and looked at her quietly for a moment. "Do you know how much time we have left before reaching the Isle of Monte?" he asked. Rosen blinked, startled. "We will arrive in 3 days," he continued. "We are heading west. Even though the wind is against us, sailing is easy now with steamers. Quite impressive, isn't it?" "Is this your cabin, Captain?" Rosen asked. "No," he replied. "It's Ian's." "Then, where is he?" "He stepped out for a smoke." Rosen paused, remembering. "I thought pilots didn't smoke." The captain was silent for a moment before answering. "Well, the war is over. But he's still a pilot, right? There are still aircraft to be flown." "No," the captain said. "He's quitting. He has done enough." "I see," Rosen murmured. For some reason, that made her feel sad. "He was very worried about you, Miss Walker," the captain added. Rosen let out a small laugh. "I'm sure he's regretting his decision. After all, he hates breaking rules." "You see," the captain said slowly, "he may not be as warm as the war propaganda made him seem, but he is not as cold as you think." He reached into a drawer. "Look at this." He pulled out a small glowing object. "I gave him this when he was about 12. I found it while sailing through the Kinteri Islands. It's fluorescent moss. You can see it glow like a torch at night. He handed it to Rosen. Then he took out a few more items, these as well, a pair of binoculars, and a sea chart. He pretends not to care, but he's quite sentimental. He pointed at the map. Here, this is where we are now. And this is where we started. We've made good progress. I gave him this 15 years ago. Rosen looked at the chart carefully. It seems you've known him since he was very young, she said. You could say that, the captain replied. He was a few years above Henry in military school. I suppose they were close then? The captain shook his head lightly. No, Henry hated him, said he was too strict, too stiff, called him a devil and begged me to take him home. He paused. But even without Henry, I would have noticed Ian. He stood out. Rosen smiled faintly. His parents must have been proud of him. To her, Ian. Connor was someone who must have grown up surrounded by love, a proud family, a large home, a life she could never imagine, a perfect portrait. I'm sure they would have been, the captain said quietly, if they had lived to see him grow. Rosen flinched. His parents are gone, the captain continued. He lost them both to illness when he was very young. He looked down. After that, he and his inheritance were passed from one relative to another until he entered military school at the age of 10. I believe he was tired of people fighting over what he owned. He sighed. In military school, the government takes care of everything. Perhaps that was his only escape. His voice softened. He was forced to grow up too quickly. He doesn't express emotions. Well, and even when he does, he's not honest about them. He keeps everything buried. I feel sorry for that child. It's like he was forced to grow up too soon. The captain reached out and gently placed his hand over Rosen's. Never try to take your own life. Please, I beg you. Rosen understood. That was where all of this was leading, but that's not what happened, she said quietly. It wasn't deliberate. I just wanted to try that fruit. The captain lowered his gaze. Miss Walker, he said softly. I once had a daughter too. Rosen looked at him. I see so much of her in you. She was my first child, a precious gift after 15 years of marriage. His voice wavered slightly, but she was gone too soon. Rosen didn't respond. She knew. This wasn't about her anymore. This was a grieving father speaking, seeing his daughter in someone like her. The captain stood. You still look tired. Please get some rest. Yes, Rosen replied. As he reached the door, he paused. As I said, the Isle of Monte is still far away, he added. And I believe you are not someone who gives up, Miss Walker. Rosen listened carefully. If there was one thing she was good at, it was picking up crucial details from casual conversations. Wind, direction, temperature, the route. She didn't understand everything. But one thing became clear. If she wanted to escape, she had to head east. As the sun set and darkness settled over the sea, Rosen lay on the bed, staring at the small glowing object the captain had given her. It truly shone in the dark. Like a lighthouse, the kind of light that made you feel relieved after being lost at sea for too long. Now, she only needed a key. If she could get that from Ian Connor, and perhaps a gun as well, then what? She would be lying if she said those creatures in the ocean didn't terrify her. But she also knew how to overcome fear. A memory surfaced. Emily, run away to Valpurgis. You're a witch. You can do it, Rosen had shouted. But what about you? Emily had asked, her voice trembling. I won't die, Rosen had said firmly. I will survive, I promise. That day, it had been the first time Rosen had done something brave, a rare, shining moment in her otherwise miserable life. When she looked back at it now, it felt like a blue flame burning inside her heart, a flame that melted away fear and turned it into something lighter, something that allowed her to rise again. We will meet again, I promise. She had made that promise, and that fire still burned within her. No matter what, no matter who stood in her way, she would never accept defeat again. The door opened. Ian stepped into the cabin. Rosen immediately stood up, loosening the lace of her dress slightly. Where have you been? She asked, her tone soft, deliberate. I was waiting for you. She tried to seduce him, but Ian remained unmoved, his expression as cold as ever. How are you feeling? He asked instead. Rosen's face stiffened. So he was going to ignore it? I'm fine, she replied, forcing a smile. But where were you all this time? I was guarding the door. His tone was calm, matter-of-fact. Why work so hard? She said lightly. A normal person would just have one of his men do it. It's not that big of a deal. A minister ordered me to personally oversee you, Ian replied. You underestimate yourself. Your fame exceeds mine. Rosen let out a soft laugh. My infamy, to be exact. She tilted her head. So what now? Dinner is over. Are you sending me back to my cell? No, Ian said. Your condition isn't good. Until we reach the Isle of Monte, you'll stay here. Rosen smiled faintly. That's fine with me. But where will you stay? A spare room? Ian looked at her. This is my cabin, he said. Where else would I go? I'll sleep on the couch. His eyes narrowed slightly. And you'll try something the moment I leave. I can already see it on your face. Rosen's gaze flickered to his waist. The key was gone. He wasn't joking. He wasn't that careless. She laughed lightly. What are you talking about? You think I'd try to jump into the ocean? Ian's expression hardened. You tried to kill yourself. I'm not taking any more chances. So you're going to tie me up in this room? Rosen shot back. Didn't the captain tell you? I wasn't trying to kill myself. You clearly knew you could die from eating that fruit, Ian said sharply. That's why you specifically asked Henry for it, so don't make excuses. Rosen flinched. Wait, let me explain, she said quickly, but Ian finally turned fully toward her. Was it fun for you? He asked, his expression hurtful. You made me feed it to you, he continued, with my own hands. Rosen stared at him. For a brief moment, was he angry? She had been observing him for days. Ian Connor was not someone who raised his voice or gave in to emotion. He was always controlled, always rational, and if he had thought rationally, he would have known there was no way she had truly intended to kill herself. But right now, it was as if he had lost that control, and if that was the case, then she had to take this opportunity. Tears welled up in her eyes as she began to sob. You're right, she whispered weakly. What's the point of living? I'm going to end my life. Only torture and hard labor await me anyway. Ian watched her closely. She didn't hesitate to take advantage of his concern. Not now. You think you can die on me? Ian said sharply, grabbing her chin. I will never let that happen. His grip tightened. If these chains aren't enough, I'll tie down all your limbs to this bed. Rosen frowned. Are you insane? Maybe I am, Ian replied through clenched teeth. But if you try anything again, I won't let it happen. What if I bite my tongue? I'll gag you. Then I'll hold my breath. Stop talking nonsense, Ian snapped, tilting her chin upward. You can't die by holding your breath. His voice dropped, confusion slipping through. I don't understand. He looked at her, searching. You went through all that just to escape prison, so why are you doing this now? Why are you giving up? Rosen's eyes hardened. You have the audacity to ask me that? She shot back. It's because I can't escape, and you're the one who told me that. Her voice rose. You showed me those creatures. You scared me. It was him. He had told her to give up, to accept her sentence. So why was he saying this now? I was just being cautious, Ian said quietly. I never imagined you would do something like this. He paused. I know you're not someone who gives up until your last breath. Rosen stared at him. He knows me? What could he possibly know about her? The Witch of Alcapez. The murderer. You know me? She scoffed. Who are you to say that? Her voice turned sharp. Answer me, Sir Ian Connor. What do you know about me? Ian exhaled slowly. Don't get angry. Of course, I don't know you that well. His hand moved gently, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. But I know more than you think. What are you trying to say? Rosen pressed. I don't understand. Be clear. Ian fell silent. For a moment. Then, in a low whisper, he said, Don't die. Rosen froze. What? Please, Ian added quietly. Promise me you won't do anything like this again. At least, not while we're on this ship. Why should I? Rosen asked coldly. For whom? This is my last chance to mess things up for you. Why would I give that up? Ian didn't deny it. Yes, he said. You won't survive there. You won't be able to escape either. He stepped closer. But listen, I'm going to make you an offer. He reached down and unlocked the cuffs on her wrists, then her legs. Hey, what are you doing? Rosen asked, startled. But Ian ignored her and pulled her up to her feet. For the first time, she felt light, free. I'll let you walk freely in this cabin, he said. Under my watch, it won't be for long. But you'll get proper sleep, good meals. His voice softened slightly. Take this time to look back on your life. He paused. At least until we reach our destination. Promise me, Rosen, you won't try anything like that again. Rosen looked at him. How strange. He wanted her to promise she wouldn't take her own life. And he sounded genuine. What was he trying to do? But for now, she just needed to play along. Okay, she whispered softly. I promise. She didn't have much time anyway. They would reach the Isle of Monte in 3 days, so she had to act. From now on, she would behave like someone who had given up, someone simply enjoying the last bit of freedom she had been granted. And for that, she needed something. Booze, she said lightly. Get me some booze, something strong, and please, I'm dying for a smoke. Ian looked at her. Please, she added, almost playfully. Even a prisoner on death row is granted a final wish, right? Ian let out a quiet sigh. Without a word, he offered her his pack. Rosen took a cigarette and lit it, inhaling slowly. As for alcohol, Ian said, watching her, I'll get it for you tomorrow morning. Sure, she replied, smiling faintly. Smoke drifted into the air as Rosen's mind began to race. After this, he would tell her to sleep. She couldn't let that happen. She needed to keep him talking, to gather more information. But what could she ask without making him suspicious? I have a question, Sir Ian Connor, she said casually. What? He replied. When did you start smoking? It's discouraged among pilots. Toward the end of the war, he answered. What made you start? She asked, keeping her tone light. Ian glanced at her. Why? Is it a problem? No, Rosen shook her head. It just doesn't seem like you. You're a pilot. To her, he belonged in the sky. That was where he shone the brightest. Whenever his aircraft passed overhead, she used to reach up with both hands, as if she could catch it. She never cared whether they won or lost the war. Because she had been too busy, worshipping Ian Connor as he soared through those blue skies. She had fallen in love with that feeling, that sense of freedom he carried with him. Not anymore. And the war is over, Ian answered calmly. Rosen turned toward him. Then why aren't you married? The question caught him off guard. He frowned. That's none of your business. Well, it's not just me, Rosen said lightly. All your fans across the Empire are dying to know. Ian looked away slightly. There's no telling when a pilot might die in war. I'm better off without a family. Rosen tilted her head. So you're saying no soldier should get married? You went to war without even a picture of your sweetheart stitched into your helmet? Ian gave a faint grin. Maybe some do things like that, but not everyone. Rosen blinked. Was it just her imagination, or did he actually smile? You're too dry, she said, half teasing. No offense, but you're very different from what the media made you out to be. I suppose, Ian replied. Did they force you to become the poster child of the war? She asked. Well, someone had to do it, he said simply. Rosen let out a small laugh. It's your fault for being good-looking. Still better than wanting the role and not having the face for it, right? Ian's lips curved slightly. Again. Is it? Rosen blinked once more. He's smiling. But I don't think people need to get married, Ian added. Rosen smiled. If I were you, I'd have at least 3 wives, and honestly, it would be better for a wife to share you than end up with some loser. She giggled softly, then added, more casually. But from experience, I think a woman doesn't really need a man in her life. She paused. Of course, that doesn't mean I killed Hindley. You know that, right? Ian frowned. Don't talk nonsense. The Empire abolished polygamy long ago. Rosen laughed. You really know nothing about real life, do you? That might be true for the rich people like you. But in the countryside, it's common for men to have more than one wife. She tilted her head slightly. Want to know something? Ian remained silent. I was Hindley's other wife. A quiet pause followed. Of course, you didn't know, Rosen added calmly. How could you? I never told anyone. Ian's expression didn't change, but his silence deepened. I think it's time for bed, he said at last. Rosen stood up slowly. Don't you want to know more? She asked. She stepped closer, then, without hesitation, slid onto his lap. Leaning in slightly, she smiled. You see, I can tell you secrets far more entertaining than anything you've read in those newspapers. Ian looked at her. Rosen smiled faintly, thinking her plan was working, but then, I'm not interested in the least, Ian said flatly. Before she could react, he pulled her off and laid her back onto the bed. Rosen lay there, annoyed. That completely failed. But she couldn't just go to sleep like this. She had to keep him talking. Hey, she called out. Aren't you going to cuff me? I can do that before I go to bed, Ian replied calmly. Aren't you going to bed then? She asked. I don't need much sleep. Rosen narrowed her eyes. Don't need much sleep. Or you can't fall asleep. Both, he answered without hesitation. She studied him. He did look tired. After a moment, Ian picked something up and handed it to her. Rosen blinked, then frowned. Hey, I'm not a child. It's a gift from Lila, Ian said simply. Rosen paused. Why didn't you say that earlier? She hugged the toy quietly, then looked down at it. Tell Lila I said thank you, she murmured. Now go to sleep, Ian said. Rosen scoffed lightly. Hey, would you be able to sleep knowing you'll die in 3 days? I can get plenty of sleep. After that, anyway. So what are you planning? Ian asked. Staying awake for 3 nights? Rosen smirked, then her tone shifted slightly. But seriously, don't you want to know the truth? Ian pulled the covers over her. I already know the truth. Now go to... Before he could finish, Rosen grabbed his hand. No. Her grip tightened. I'm going to talk until I fall asleep. I don't care whether you listen or not. She looked at him, her voice quieter now. How a story unfolds depends on who's telling it, doesn't it? So shouldn't at least one person hear my version? Her fingers curled slightly around his hand. I don't care whether you believe me or not. I know you never will. She exhaled softly. But it doesn't matter. It's all in the past now. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. So, please, just listen to my story. I'll start from when I was 15. Until then, my life was rather boring, and this time, Ian didn't interrupt. He listened. Rosen's memories from before the age of 15 were hazy, blurry, but everything traced back to one place, the orphanage in Rearton. She had spent 15 years there, an orphanage where punishment meant being beaten, where no matter how young you were, or how sick, you still had to work to earn your keep. Life was hard, but Rosen never questioned it. She didn't know any better. She simply believed that was how life was for everyone. Until one day, she caught a glimpse of something else. It was a cold day. She had been sent out to do laundry. Snow was falling gently over the city, and it happened to be Valborg's Day. At first, she didn't know what it was, but later she learned Valborg's Day was a night of celebration, held once every year, a festival to honor the birth of the greatest witch in history. Even now, sometimes. Rosen wondered, if I hadn't looked into that window that day, would my life have been different? Maybe she could have lived a dull, quiet life, without hope, but also without despair. That day, she had paused outside a house, and through the window, she saw a family. They were gathered around a table laughing, wearing clean new clothes, eating warm food. She couldn't hear their voices clearly, but she understood. A child received a toy from her father and threw her arms around him happily. "I love you," the father whispered. Rosen couldn't hear it fully, but she read it from his lips. That night, back at the orphanage, she sat there in silence, bewildered. Love. She had always thought those words belonged only in plays or novels. But that wasn't true. People said them in real life, parents to their children, lovers to each other. And suddenly, an unbearable sadness settled inside her, because for the first time she realized no one had ever said those words to her. The night felt colder than ever. She wanted something, anything, to warm her. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She had always thought crying was weakness. As a child, the sound of others crying had irritated her, because crying didn't change anything. But now, she understood she had been wrong. They weren't crying because they were weak. They were crying because they had once known warmth, and lost it. And so they were able to recognize what a sad, desolate place they now found themselves in. Unlike them, Rosen had never known that warmth. And that night, she finally understood what that meant. She was alone. On St. Valburg's Day, people lit candles. They prayed to Valburg, the greatest witch, to grant their wishes. That night, Rosen made one too. She closed her eyes and whispered softly, "Oh, Valburg, please take pity on me. I don't care who it is. Just send someone to hold me. Someone who will tell me they love me and truly mean it." She hesitated, then added quietly, "And if that's too much to ask, it's okay. Even if they don't mean it, I just need someone to wrap me in a warm embrace." "Rosen! Rosen!" a voice called out. Rosen blinked, coming out of her daze, and turned toward it. "Did you call me?" she asked. "Yes," her friend replied, watching her closely. "What's with you these days? Is something wrong?" She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Or, is it because your birthday is coming up? Girls over the age of 15 have to leave the orphanage, you know." Rosen didn't look up. She continued washing the dishes, her hands moving mechanically. "Well," she said quietly, "I'm sure I'll be sold off as a maid, or as a concubine, and the money will go straight to the headmistress." She paused, then added under her breath, "Better to be a concubine than a maid." Behind her, a few of the other girls began arguing. "A concubine is just at the mercy of her husband," one snapped. "And maids are safe," another shot back. "They're no better off. They're still at their master's mercy." The voices rose, tension filling the small space. Then suddenly, "Rosen!" A girl rushed in. "The headmistress is calling for you. Someone is here to see you." Rosen turned, startled. "Someone came to see me?" Inside the office, the headmistress sat before a well-dressed man. "Would you mind waiting for a moment?" she asked politely. "She won't be long." "Of course," the man replied with a gentle smile. "It's no trouble at all to wait for a lady." His gaze softened slightly. "I look forward to seeing her up close." Inside the room, Rosen felt restless. Should she wear her best dress? Should she put on some makeup? But if all they wanted was a maid, then there was no point in trying to look pretty. Taking a quiet breath, she finally stepped into the headmistress's office. "Hello?" she greeted softly. "Oh, Rosen, come here, child," the headmistress said with a warm smile. Rosen's eyes shifted toward the man standing nearby. All the girls had been whispering that her future husband would be some old man, but the moment she saw him, her eyes widened. "This is your groom-to-be," the headmistress said, "Mr. Hindley Howers." The man stood up and turned toward her. "Hello, Rosen Walker," he said with a polite smile. Or perhaps I should say, Rosen Howers. Soon to be, at least. Rosen greeted him back, but her mind was still in shock. He was younger, of course older than her, but not old. He looked normal. "Are you certain she's healthy?" Hindley asked, his gaze scanning Rosen. "You see, I need her to give me plenty of children, but she looks rather skinny." "Oh, Mr. Howers," the headmistress chimed in smoothly. "You've already seen her medical records, and, well, that will depend on you now. Dr. Robinson himself vouched for her." Rosen straightened slightly. She smiled brightly, trying her best. If he didn't choose her, she might end up somewhere far worse. Hindley nodded after a moment. "I suppose she'll look better after a proper wash." "All right. I'll take your word for it." "Perfect," the headmistress said quickly. "Please sign here, Mr. Howers." He paid in cash. Rosen sat quietly in her chair, relief slowly settling in. It had worked, and he seemed kind. She felt a small sense of happiness. "Ah, Rosen, could you give me your hand?" Hindley said gently. "Yes," she replied, startled, looking up at him. He took her hand and slipped a ring onto her finger. "It fits just right," he murmured. Rosen stared at it closely. Was this a dream? No, it was real. "You see," Hindley continued, smiling down at her, "I've been watching you for quite some time. You were the one I liked the most out of all the girls here." Then, as if remembering something, he pulled out a small teddy bear and handed it to her. In that moment, Rosen felt certain. Valburg had answered her prayer. She was going to fall in love with this man. And that was how Rosen first met Hindley Howers, and became Rosen Howers. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want to be part of our growing community, hit join to support the channel. Take care and see you soon.